Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar and discussion topic today. My name is James Wee, and I'll be your host. And to get things started here, there's a bit of housekeeping that I wanted to just make sure that all the participants here are taken care of. If you see right now on your screen a Zebra handheld device, then you are good. But if you don't, and you see a dark screen and there's a Get Flash click, kindly click that to allow your browser to run Flash, and you're going to need that to view all the content in this webinar. So I'm going to wait maybe 20 seconds to give everyone time to actually click the Get Flash button, so that and then we can get started here. All right, well, I'm back, and hopefully everyone actually can see the presentation slide in front of you. Again, my name is James Wee, and I'll be your host today. And welcome again to our webinar, and our topic today is mobile delivery management and the paperless back office for distributors. In terms of an agenda for today, let me just run through what we'll be covering. Initially, we'll be providing some overview in terms of the state of the food distribution industry in terms of some of the challenges in delivery management. And today we'll also have some participants here, namely John Yancigay, who's the Vice President of Operations from DiCarlo Distributors. And he has come onto this webinar to essentially present the case study of how they've successfully implemented mobile delivery management solutions into their operations. And we'll have essentially a discussion and a review of the case study there. And then also part of today's agenda is for us to share with the audience essentially what the application capabilities are, and we'll be going through a demonstration of the application in the form of a day in the life of a driver. So without further ado, let me sort of just make some introductions to the webinar team members. As I mentioned, John Yancigay is Vice President of Operations at DiCarlo. John, welcome to, and thank you for your participation in this webinar.
My pleasure.
As well, great. And as well, to help us sort of with the presentation is Pell St. Fort. Pell is, an almost a 20-year veteran and a solution specialist around mobile delivery management. Pell has been instrumental in supporting a fair share of our food distribution clients around the country implement proof of delivery. And again, my name is James Wee. I'm the Vice President of Fleet Solutions at Descartes Systems Group. So let's kick things off here. Just a general comment, it's interesting in our day and age where banks and telecoms and utilities have implemented, paperless initiatives. And quite frankly, we see very, large sort of major food service distributors, they themselves have also implemented paperless initiatives for the delivery operations. But yet there's a significant number of companies still in the food service distribution space that is still sort of operating with massive amounts of paper and paper management in their day-to-day delivery operations, which is really surprising given the key benefits and the efficiency gains that can be realized. And in that, what we are attempting to do today as part of the webinar is to examine how certain food distributors have implemented technology to modernize their delivery operations, and how they've seen tremendous operational savings and efficiency gains. But before we turn over to John to really discuss some of the challenges that he had faced, prior to implementing technology with in the delivery management of his day-to-day. What I thought we could do is maybe take a quick review of, the realities of today's distribution operations, where it is largely, for a lot of food distributors, a highly paperwork-driven process, right? So if you think about it, at the beginning of the day, it's not uncommon to hear the buzzing of industrial type printers printing out 2 to 3 ply delivery tickets and manifest, as well. And alongside with that, there's a fair amount of cost, just and not necessarily just in the paper, but also in the print cartridges. But more costly, quite frankly, is essentially the administrative paper sorting and the handling. It's a fairly labor-intensive process that distributors undergo on a day-to-day basis. So that's one of the areas where there's an opportunity for efficiency gains and cost savings for a lot of distributors is in the front end of the process to eliminate a fair amount of that. Additionally, if you think about the driver themselves, and in an environment where it's sort of driven by a lot of manual processes and a fair amount of paperwork, this opens up the organization, the drivers, to a bunch of errors and mistakes, right? So, for example, in the unloading process, when a driver arrives at a stop and is making a delivery, organizations that don't have technology to manage the delivery management, there is essentially no systemic checks and balances, if you will, to manage if the items that are being unloaded and needed for a particular delivery are indeed accurate, right? So there's a little bit of exposure there. Moreover, as we recognize, there are occasions where there are adjustments that need to be made at each delivery stop because of either an overage or shortage or damage such situation. And in an environment where there's no technology to do that and everything's sort of done in an analog fashion using paper, there's a heavy reliance on handwritten exception notes that occur at each stop, and that again opens up for potential errors and mistakes, both from a customer-facing perspective as well as in the back office. And we will certainly come to that in a few moments for me to highlight some of the potential issues that arise as a result of that. And lastly, around exception and adjustment handling, there is a lot of food service distributor the drivers are also tasked with actually payment collection and making adjustments, using sort of without technology, again, opens up for the proper calculations to be realized, and then again, potential opportunity for errors as well. But moving right along, right, if we turn our attention back, from the field back to the back office, if you think about what actually happens from a day-to-day perspective, there's all the completed delivery tickets that are executed in the field come back to the distribution center. And at the end of the day, there's a consolidation effort happening, and whether it's the next day or 3 days later, the aggregated delivery tickets now have to be inputted into the back-end system. So there's a fair amount of labor that's involved in manually keying in clean orders. And at the same time, there's also a fair amount of adjustments happening from the administrative staff to enter all the updated invoices into the billing system. Things that essentially can come up as a result of that, again, in an environment where paper is the medium to actually record all the adjustments, is that you're relying on things like, the handwriting of a particular driver to be clear in terms of what adjustments need to be made. There's an example here, the comment that you see here is that, hey, is that a 1 or is that a 7, right? When you're making a quantity adjustment. And then lastly, where we hear from a lot of our clients that have implemented a delivery management system where they see, significant improvements, is that rather than having, at the back end of the process, there's in the order confirmation process, they see, wrong collected amounts that are happening in the field, because largely this is all, again, driver dependent, as opposed to a way to have a systemic way to actually, do all the proper recalculations for the driver at the stop. So these are things that, we see, today in a highly manual and a paper-driven environment. And the last thing I'll just say before I turn over to John, for him to sort of share his experience in terms of proof of delivery and mobile delivery management, is that just a bit of a perspective. When you're looking at one distribution center with roughly 30 trucks or more, and on an average day, when you're seeing 15 orders or stops daily, that's roughly at least 450 delivery tickets daily that needs to be processed and handled in the back end. And what that essentially, translates into is a lot of order entry happening in the back office. And from there is also lots of review that needs to occur. As I indicated previously, adjustments that have been made in the field, there's a fair amount of review and interpretation of what actually happened in the field. And in a manual environment, these are the potential issues that come about that makes this fairly labor intensive. And post-entry of the records, the delivery tickets into the back-end system, there's also the whole notion of, document storage as well as document potentially destruction. So all in all, just if you kind of look at the entire delivery management process, the amount of paper that's involved, the amount of labor that's involved in terms of handling the paper, the reality is that a lot of companies see anywhere between 1 to 3 headcount to essentially handle the post-delivery process. So look, I thought it was good to maybe do a bit of a review with the group here in terms of what it means essentially when your delivery operations is operating in a mode where there's not electronic technologies to help with the mobile workflow and the proof of delivery in the field. So I thought this was maybe a good place where I can actually turn things over to John. John, John has been gracious enough to come in to sort of share his experiences as the VP of Operations at DiCarlo, and how they essentially implemented mobile delivery management and proof of delivery, and what problems that he and his organization addressed utilizing the technology. John, welcome. Thank you for being here. Perhaps before we dive into the case study, perhaps you can maybe take a few moments to kind of introduce the DiCarlo distributors.
Absolutely, and a great lead-in for this webinar, James. You did a great job. Yes, my name is John Yancigay. I'm with DiCarlo Distributors, the VP of Operations. It's a family-run operation. I happen to be the only outlaw, but related as well. We were founded in 1963. It's family-owned and operated, and we do about 50 to 60 routes a day. And again, James hit it right on the head. Yeah, it's between 12 and 15 stops a route. So in your estimation there, that was pretty well right on. We do about 6 million cases a year from Maine to Virginia, and we're headquartered in the middle of Long Island, pretty much landlocked here. Everything's got to go through Manhattan to get out of here, and we do that area through 3 other satellite locations. One in Belmar, New Jersey, the other one in Port Kearney, and we have a newer location in Westborough, Massachusetts. And again, we got to the point probably about 6 or 7 years ago, or maybe a little longer than that, probably about 8 years ago, when we decided, the manual way of doing things, it was just starting to, that wave was just about coming over us, and it was going to drown us at some point. So we needed to find a better, more efficient way of getting all this documentation, the deliveries done, and not kind of fill up our warehouse full of filing cabinets and people trying to look up invoices and old invoices and credits and all that process. So what we did was, well, let me go through some of the challenges that we did have. And again, on your screen is a list of them. I'm not going to read off the screen, but that 3-part invoice paper, feeding out of that printer every morning, just cycling through for hours upon hours. Yeah, that was pretty much a headache for us. And I guess the biggest thing for that is when you separate those pieces of paper, those lines probably don't line up exactly like you had them when they left the building. Drivers are sticking them in their pocket, sticking them in their truck. They wind up going all over the place. And even when they're writing credits down, the customer's copy might not look exactly like the copy that you got, your top copy that you keep for your own records. Might not look the same. So we were having that issues with drivers coming back saying, hey, we credited these accounts, these items off of this invoice, but in fact it was a line underneath or a line above, and that could be substantial as far as credits and what we're giving back to the customer if not done correctly. Not only that, trying to put stuff back in stock off of those papers, that manual process of trying to keep your inventory correct for credit returns or any kind of returns that the customer gives you was not as accurate as we wanted it. And then if you even talk about the customer side of it, you really hate as a distributor to be always asking a customer, well, did you get that or didn't you get that? And should we give you credit for that or shouldn't we give you credit for that? And the customer is always right. Theory comes into effect, and they're not going to tell you what they didn't get that was more expensive, but they definitely will tell you what they didn't get that was less expensive. And again, your loss either way. So again, that lag time and that need for a clean invoice and to get some kind of system that put exactly what the driver delivered into a system that we would not have to have 3 or 4 hands touch to process. That's the big thing. Revenue leakage, I mentioned that as well. Just a missed delivery. And again, like I mentioned, the customer will never tell you he got a more expensive item, but he will tell you when he got a less expensive item than what he ordered. And that's what we were finding. The driver's time to go back and to fix that error was tremendous. And a lot of times, that was before the DOT regulations, but we made our drivers go back, and it extended their day tremendously in order to correct a misdeliver of an item. So that's something that sometimes you won't see as a bottom line item, but it did take up a lot of the driver's time in order to fix those mistakes, sending a driver from not going to his next stop, but sending him back to a stop previous to get product to bring back. And that's pretty substantial. In fuel, time, that. All right, and then
no, John, no, thanks. That was a good highlight, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit, because I think that what you're essentially suggesting is that when you actually did implement a solution, the way you essentially address the misdelivery piece, meaning that because you have sort of a system to confirm with each driver at every stop accurately what he or she needs to actually deliver, through barcode scanning and using the software system, essentially what was probably something that didn't happen all the time, but happened enough that it was costly, that drivers essentially are making sure that in each and every stop they're not over-delivering and they're not under-delivering and they're not delivering the wrong items, because everything's tracked and scanned through the system. Is that another way to sort of maybe articulate how you kind of benefited from? Yep.
Absolutely. And what it did, and again, I don't know if you want me to go into that presently, but having a driver leave a stop and be 100% confident that everything that he delivered is correct, and that he can comfortably go to the next stop without having to worry about having a customer say he got the wrong product, is invaluable to us, at least as a distributor. So
that's great. Thanks, John.
Yeah, not a problem. Just the last couple ones here, the inventory shrinkage. I think I touched on it lightly. But again, we never had a process or a system or a scanning ability to actually say what was there and what was not there as far as what was loaded on the truck. So there was no way to make the system better because we didn't know whether it was a selector, loader, driver, a customer, someone on the street trying to pick something off the back of the truck and we lost it. We never knew that until we found a new system. So that's kind of all the challenges that we had. Again, our biggest thing is customer service. So anything that makes the customer more satisfied that he's getting what he ordered, paying the correct amount, and seeing that on an invoice is what we were looking for.
No, thanks, John. Thanks for highlighting and reviewing some of the challenges that you were faced with. And I imagine, what you've done essentially since then is essentially implemented a mobile delivery management system, aka proof of delivery. I think perhaps this is probably a good time for us to share with the group the solution. And so what I'm going to do right now is turn things over to Pell St. Fort, who's our solution specialist, to illustrate the solution that DiCarlo has implemented in the field to provide a high-level view of the capability of the application. Pell?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone can see my Zebra device on the screen. I'm streaming my Zebra device, which is I have in my office right now. Okay. The driver has already logged in and downloaded his route. And what you're looking at here is the driver is at the depot, that's a fictitious company that I created. It's gourmet food. So he's at the depot, and he can see his manifest. Okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to swipe to complete the depot stop, and then now the application prompts the driver to do a load confirmation. Typically in the food service space, drivers don't load their truck. The truck is already loaded for the driver by the warehouse worker. However, organizations want the driver to ensure that they have the right load before leaving the depot, because you don't want the driver to be 200 miles down the road only to find out that he or she has the wrong load. So we provide a feature called a load confirmation, which allows the driver to quickly verify the load by just simply scanning an item that is inside the truck. That could be a pallet, a case. The driver scans that, and the application, if it finds a match, says, hey, yes, you have the right load. On the other hand, had the driver scanned the wrong item, which I'm about to do purposely, the application emits a bad tone. I don't know if you could hear that, but it also tells the driver that scan was unsuccessful. That will be a cue for the driver that he has the wrong load. Okay? So I've done my load confirmation. So I'm ready now to leave. I'm going to confirm that I'm done with the confirmation. So I'm ready to leave. The next thing that you're going to see is a pre-trip workflow. And this workflow can be configured to meet your specific needs. What you're looking at is an asset checkout. Organizations, not only they want to track the cases that the driver is delivering, but over time they find out also that some of those assets, such as pallet jack and other things, if they start losing them, they start affecting the bottom line. So they implement workflows such as asset checkout, where they can tie an asset, specifically if it's an expensive asset like a pallet jack, they can tie that to a route to a driver. There is also corresponding asset checking at the end of the route when the driver returns back to the depot, where you can verify whether or not the driver has returned with the asset that he left with. Okay? In this case, I'm just going to enter a few things. Let's say I have the load bar. I could have also scanned the load bar if the load bar was scannable. I'm going to go next. In addition to the asset checkout, there are also the things that you may want to remind the driver to pick up. For example, Easy Pass if it's going to a toll road. Or the other thing is customer keys for key drops. So if the driver is making some unattended deliveries, so you want to remind the driver to pick up those customer keys. Otherwise, there is no way he's going to be able to get inside the customer location and make those deliveries. So I've done my pre-trip workflow, and I'm ready now to get on the road. I'm going to swipe to indicate that I'm on my way to the next stop, which is Mill Road Smokehouse. Before I arrive, let me show you a couple of features. If I click on details for that stop that I'm about to service, I'm on my way to that stop, you can see a lot of useful information on that screen, on the detail, stop detail screen. For example, you see the customer address. The customer address is a hot link. If a driver doesn't know how to get there and click on the customer address, he will automatically get to driving direction, okay, voice-activated driving directions that will guide the driver to the customer location. It will stay on that driving direction until it gets to that customer location. If he wants to call the customer, he can click on the customer number, and that will dial the customer number. There is other important piece of information. For example, specific comments, like stop-specific comments. In this case, the customer has parking restrictions. So we're telling the driver about those parking restrictions. And finally, the driver also has a summary of all the items, the number of items that he needs to deliver at that location per compartment. So there is, the dry compartment, the driver has 5 items, frozen 3 items, reefer 1 item, etc. Okay? Let's go back to our stop list. The driver will swipe and say that he arrives. Now, the next thing that you're seeing is another workflow. Again, all these workflows can be turned off, by the way. So if you don't want that, you can turn them off, and you can actually customize them as well. And the good thing about our application, you can do so without having to write a single line of code. Your customer implement and deploy workflows that are specific to their needs, and this requires no product change, no coding whatsoever. Okay? So in this particular case, we are asking the driver to do a reading of the reefer and the cooler compartment. So we all know that in the food space, the driver is delivering very temperature-sensitive items. In fact, certain customers require that you actually record the temperature at which you deliver certain items because of the temperature sensitiveness of those items. So the driver will go ahead and, record the temperature. This feature that you're seeing, the temperature recording, can be implemented in multiple ways in our application. You can do that at the beginning of each stop, which is what you're looking at. It can be done at the end of each stop. It can also be done over the road. Where if the driver is in transit on the road, some organization would want the driver every 2 hours to check the temperature. All this can be implemented in our application. So I'm done with the temperature reading. Now what you're looking at is the list of items that the driver has to deliver for this customer. Now, the configuration that I'm showing you is that I'm showing you all the items, regardless of the compartment. The driver can see all the items. So you see dry, frozen, reefer, etc. For some other configurations, the customer may want to guide the driver compartment by compartment. So for example, if they want the driver to start with the frozen item first, then go to reefer, then go to dry. When the driver first comes in, the driver will see the frozen item. Then once he's done completing the frozen item, then he's going to go, the application will say, okay, now I'm going to take you to the reefer compartment. And then after, I'm going to take you to the dry compartment. If you think about it, it's a way of allowing the driver to do a reconciliation compartment by compartment. It makes the driver life a lot easier. That way, the driver, once he's done with reefer, he doesn't have to look for anything in reefer anymore because he's done with reefer, then it goes to dry. Okay? The other thing to look here is that you see the different icons. On the first icon, as you can see, is a palette. It tells you that the other icon is a case, as you can see. So that tells you that we support both palette as well as cases. It is very customary in the food service space for customers to pallet load their truck to save space. And those pallets can span multiple stops. So a pallet can contain items for multiple stops. We support that as well. Okay? All right. So the driver now is going to start scanning. Okay. Now, if I scan an item that doesn't belong to the stop, notice what the application does. The application says hey, this item cannot be added. And I did that on purpose. You heard John mention earlier that, hey, it's good to know that when the driver leaves a stop, the driver delivers everything that he was supposed to deliver. That's one way we implement that. So the driver scanned the wrong item, the application will not allow him to deliver that. There is another feature which I didn't implement in this demo, is that they are in the food service space. Some customers may want the driver to pick up, to do unscheduled pickup. So if you allow the driver to do that for a specific customer, when the driver scans an unscheduled item, the application would have prompted a different screen and asking him whether or not he's trying to pick up an unscheduled item. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and start scanning. Okay, I scan. I will keep scanning those items. Okay. You will notice as I scan those items, every item that I scan is basically removed from the list because the application finds a match. Now I come to the pallet. I'm going to scan the pallet license plate. Now the application tells me, hey, you need to break the pallet, and I'm going to break it. Again, the behavior for a pallet is configurable. So if it's a pallet drop and there is no need to break the pallet, and you know the driver doesn't need to break the pallet, then you can configure the pallet so that when the driver scans the pallet license plate, the application just services it, and it doesn't prompt the driver to break it. In this particular case, I wanted the driver to break the pallet license plate. That's the reason to break the pallet. That's the reason why the driver actually sees that prompt to break the pallet once I scan the pallet license plate. So I break the pallet, and the application shows you all the items belonging that are content of that pallet belonging to the customer. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and scan. Okay, the driver is done servicing all the items at that stop, okay? And now he's going to click done. Now we get to the payment screen. The driver is going to, the customer owes $194.64. The driver is going to collect the payment. For this customer, the driver is only allowed to collect check. Payment type is configurable on a customer-by-customer basis. This customer can only pay by check, and that's the only thing the driver is allowed to take. So in this case, the driver will select check. The driver will enter the amount. Enter the check number. And click done. Now, the reason why the application goes back to the payment screen again is because sometimes, for certain companies, they may want the driver to collect payment for a delivery that was made a week or 2 weeks prior. So the driver can, if you configure the application to do so, the driver is allowed to actually collect the payment for a job for another that is not on today's work, but that was on the previous work. Okay. Done. Now we are on the signature screen. You can see on top of the signature screen, the application shows a summary of the total item expected to deliver and the actual items that were delivered. And it does a summary compartment by compartment, dry, frozen, and reefer. At the bottom of the screen, if the customer wanted to review before signing, review the deliveries, we'll click on the review button, okay? And the customer will be able to see all the items that were delivered. The driver can also add a note on, as you see, by clicking add note. So the driver is going to hand the device to the customer, and the customer is going to sign. Done. Now, the application shows the driver a list of people who usually sign at that customer location. the default number is 5, so we keep a list of 5 people. It's configurable. You can actually, by configuration, you can choose to have the application keep a longer list. So if you want 10, the list to show 10 people who have recently signed, you can do that. In this case, the driver will click the name of the person who signed. If the person who is signing on that day is not on the list, the driver can click Add Contact at the bottom to add the signer. Click Done. The next thing that I'm showing you is that at the end of the stop now, the driver is prompted to collect containers, empty containers. And we all know those containers can be pretty expensive. So organizations actually want to encourage drivers to collect those empty containers and return them to the distribution center. Okay, I'll just enter one of them. Okay. Done. So we're done with the stop, and the application will actually show you an image of the receipt that can be printed if the driver carries a mobile printer and left with the customer, or that receipt can also be archived on the server in real time and can be pulled and emailed to the customer. Our application is smart enough to understand which customer wants a receipt and which customer doesn't. So when the driver services a customer who wants a receipt, the application will automatically prompt him to print a receipt. Otherwise, it will not. Okay? And the receipt can also be customized to your name. This is an example of a receipt where it shows all the details, etc., the customer name, the amount that was collected, and so on and so forth, as well as the signature of the customer. Okay? Again, this is the logo of my fictitious company. That can be your own logo here. Done, and I'm now ready to leave the customer location, and I'm going to go to the next stop. Okay? So I'm going to be en route to the next stop, and I arrive. Again, I'm going to do the temperature reading that we have seen at the first stop. Now, in this particular stop, this is a COD customer. And in our application, we have a feature that really allows you to alert the driver of some important things that the driver needs to do. In this particular case, we are telling the driver to verify proper form of payment that the customer is capable of paying before even bothering to unload the truck. Okay? So in this case, we provide the alert to the driver, and there is no way that the driver can ignore that. It's a big alert right in the middle of the screen. The driver will acknowledge that. We click OK. Okay, now we get to the list of items that the driver needs to deliver. Again, we're going to scan. What you're looking at here is a catch weight item. Certain organizations do configure catch weight on the NL device. And the reason why they do so is to catch discrepancies between the weight entered at the warehouse and the actual weight of the item. So when you identify an item as a catch weight item, the driver is prompted to verify the actual weight. So the warehouse worker probably enters 17.8 kilograms. The driver looks at the box and says, well, that's not that. So driver enters 35 and click submit. The application says, well, you have made a mistake because this item can never weigh that much. This is the range for that item. The driver will look and say, oh, yes, I did make a mistake. I did make a mistake. Enter that, and it's 25 kilograms. So why is that important for certain organizations? For obvious reasons, right? I mean, there is a big difference between 17 kilograms and 25 kilograms. So you basically leaving 8 kilograms on the table for which you could have charged your customer. By actually capturing the right weight, you can actually charge the customer more, and the application will increase the amount due as a result of the transaction that the driver just did. Okay, so we'll continue scanning. The other thing that we do, not only I showed you that the driver can record temperature of a compartment, But there are for certain specific items, the driver may also be required to take a temperature probe and read the temperature of an item. In this case, the driver is delivering fresh chicken, so the driver will use the probe, read the temperature, and record that. Okay? We'll continue scanning. Now, there are a couple of features that I want to show you. At any given point in time, the driver can go ahead and click on the stop summary to get an idea of where he's at, how much progress he has made so far. Okay? That is usually useful when the driver has a lot of items to deliver. He's scanning, and he wants to know where he stands. So if, for example, he has 15 items to deliver. So far, he has delivered 8 of them. Okay? And then you can see what he has delivered compartment by compartment. Okay? You can also take a look at anything as far as catch rate is concerned. Remember that change that he just made. So you can also look at that. The other thing that the driver can do is look at item count. Okay? So rather than basically looking at a long list, so if he has a bunch of items to deliver, he can basically go ahead and look at the item count and start scanning right on the item count. Okay? Now, I scanned that on purpose. What I did is that I wanted to show you how the application behaves when you scan an item that you have already serviced. The application says, hey, you have already scanned that item. Why do you want to scan it again? Now, there might be a reason. Maybe the customer look at it and say, I don't want it because it's damaged. In this case, the driver would have adjusted it. But we're not going to do so. Okay? We're going to continue scanning. Notice that as I scan in this, you notice how it actually increments the quantity service. Okay? But we're going to go back to our item list. Okay? Next thing that I want to show you is a very, very important feature called partial credit. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take that juice box. Okay? The customer looks at it, says, well, it's leaking. So sure enough, they open the box. And there are 24 jars there, but 3 of them are damaged. Normally, organizations that do not have a feature like partial credit like ours, typically what they would do, they would have the driver deliver the entire case and credit the customer the entire case, or they would have the driver go back with the case to the distribution center, and once you open that case, you can no longer resell that case as a case anymore. In this particular case, the partial credit allows you to deliver the case and just credit those 3 bottles that are damaged. Okay, click done. Click done. Now, I've scanned so far. I want to show you that our application will also allow the driver to deliver manually if the barcode is not readable. And I can basically swipe to deliver. The difference is that when the driver delivers manually, the application will tell you whether or not that item was scanned or delivered manually. That will also count sometimes against the driver if you want that. You can configure the application to show percentage of items that were delivered manually. And if that percentage reaches a threshold on the server, that driver will be red flag. Okay? Now, the next thing that I want to show you is a line item adjustment. I just showed you a partial credit. Now, what I'm going to show you is a total adjustment. The customer wants to refuse this item, so the driver will adjust. Okay? Now, I'll click done. And then there are reason codes that are highly configurable, so you can configure those reason codes. These will be your own reason codes. And then so the driver will select the proper reason code. The driver can also take a picture of that item that is damaged. He will click on the photo, okay? And then the driver will take a picture of that item. Okay. So the picture is taken. You click done. And submit. Okay? So we're done with this. And then there is also a return. We're going to take the return and be done. So now the driver is done. He's going to collect the payment. But I want to show you in this case, let me click on details. Remember, John mentioned earlier that what the application has done for him is the insurance that when the driver leaves the customer location, he provides a clean invoice to the customer. Okay? One of the way we implement that, we can provide that. Remember the juice. Now that wasn't the oil, it's the juice. Remember the juice that the driver credited, where he credited 3 bottles to the customer. If you click on details, so this is the partial credit amount. You notice how the application automatically subtracts that from the total amount. Okay? We also notice that the application, when you pass us a tax rate, and if you tell us that it is a taxable amount, we will actually calculate the tax for you. So we don't rely on the driver to do the calculation. Okay? As you can see here, that's the total tax. All right, so let's go down, click done, and go back to, so we're going to add limit. This is typically a cash customer as the alert for the driver, but the customer in this case says, you know what, I don't have all the amount in cash, I only have $200. Okay, so the driver collects $200. And now the application says, well, Mr. Customer, you have $92.48 left. The customer says, I'm going to pay that by check. Well, the driver looks, yes, the customer is allowed to pay by check. Click check. Because this is not cash, you can configure, depending on the type of payment the customer is paying, you can configure the application to force the driver to call the back office for a payment authorization. So the driver will click that number, call the back office, get a payment authorization code, enter that, and then now the driver can collect the amount. That's 92.48, and enter the check number. Click done. Okay, we're ready. Again, as you can see, because there are exceptions here, the columns where there are exceptions, they are red flags. So there were 7 dry items to deliver. The driver only delivered 6. There was 1 couldn't deliver. Okay, you will hand the device to the customer. The customer sign. The driver select the name of the signer. Done. We have seen that before. That's the empty container. Okay. Then we present it with the receipt. Okay. You have seen this before. We're not going to go through that again. So we'll tap proceed. And then the driver basically depart. Stop. So now we are ready to return to the distribution center. So the driver says, is and what? Once you arrive at the distribution center, certain organizations implement what we call an end-of-day receipt reconciliation. So the driver has collected a bunch of payments. So he's returning to the distribution center. Someone is checking the driver. So if you implement that, the application will prompt the driver to print the receipt reconciliation and then hand it to the person who is checking in it. Okay? So that's what to do. And then this is the receipt that the driver will put out. Again, all that can be configurable. So you can see we break it down by, say, this is what the driver has, 1 check for this amount, 1 cash for this amount, etc. And then at the bottom, we tell you what happened for the amount collected for each customer. Okay? So the driver will print that and give it to the person who is checking it. One thing that I didn't mention, which is also important, we also have what we call midday payment reconciliation. Certain organizations, when the driver collects cash like that, so they don't want the driver to keep driving around with all that cash, so they may designate a place where the driver go and make that deposit that amount. So the driver, just like you see at end of day, for midday, the driver can actually print a receipt which serves as a deposit receipt and gives that along with the with the money that is deposited. Okay, so now we are at the end of the day. So these are the items that our application expects the driver to have on the truck when he returns to the distribution center. What are those items? This is the return item, and this is the item that the customer refused. Now, the driver can do that, or you can configure the application so that a warehouse person checks the truck in, the driver in. So the driver we can even scan or receive it manually, and then we're going to receive this. For certain type of item, like a return item, you can implement additional workflow such that the person who is receiving those items can also choose to make additional decisions. In this case, we say, okay, it was good, return to inventory, and we're going to credit the customer right on the back. Okay. That's all I have for you today. That's the end of the driver workflow. We took it from starting to end offward. So James, you can take over.
Great, thank you, Pell, and appreciate the demonstration. So, as for the folks in the audience, that was fairly comprehensive look at some of the capability of our mobile delivery management solution. And one of the probably takeaways from the team here is that it was fairly detailed and very comprehensive, and quite frankly, there's certainly a lot more that we can get into. But I think in the interest of time, I think what I'd like to do is come back to wrapping up sort of the presentation here. So John, as we talk about the post-implementation, perhaps maybe we can share with the group the things that you saw in terms of benefits and what you realized in your operation by implementing the proof of delivery application.
Absolutely. Just go over some of the things that we realized. The proof of delivery actually on the scanner and by scanning has virtually eliminated the credit issue on disparity between what the customer said they received and what we actually delivered. Having the drivers go back to stops has again, almost totally been eliminated. Payment process is completely redone, more efficient, and quickly done so that everyone in the organization can see any credit, any delivery, anything that was paid almost instantaneously, which gives great visibility to the sales force as well as customer service as well as dispatch. So all that in total has saved us a whole bunch of different things as far as the people, just the people aspect of it, the 3 or 4 people that would process just the paper invoices and the credits, probably eliminated that by 30 or 40%. The ability to actually, like Pell mentioned, to redo an invoice because of a credit for anybody that had a COD or cash payment that was due. If they had a credit on that same invoice, it was sort of a nightmare to make sure that the driver actually had it correct and his calculation was correct. And as Pell showed very plainly, it did the calculation for you, and there was no calculation for the driver to do at all, which again makes the confidence of the driver, making sure he's collected the right amount, making sure they delivered the right product, 100% confidence in the stop was actually complete. And lastly, I would say that the return to stock and the payments both are probably one of the biggest things that we've realized, that the inventory is a lot more accurate because we're getting the products back that we expected to get back and not something that the driver circled on a manifest. So with that said, that's a pretty high view of all the solutions that we found. And James, if you want me to expand on any of that, please let me know.
Sure. No, thanks, John, for sharing with the audience the things that the result of and the impact of the solution on your operation. So with the remaining time left, perhaps we can open things up to questions to the audience. Let me take a look at, and for those who are unaware, you have the ability to basically pose questions here in the Q&A section here. If you want to type in the message, I can read off the question, and then we will try to get those questions answered for you. So let me take a quick look first as the first question I have up here. So John, this one's directed to you. Of all the things you mentioned in your case study, what would you consider to be the biggest win for DiCarlo in terms of what you realized from this initiative?
Two biggest things off the top of my head, and again, I'm speaking of the first one's from a VP of operations, and it's that 100% confidence that a driver actually delivered what the scanner and the invoice says he delivered. The second biggest thing is that the customer service, sales department, dispatch, executives can see the results of the delivery instantaneously for credits and payments in case they have a question or want to see how the driver did on the road, which we never had before. So those are the two big things.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, John. Another question that came up from the audience here is the system is fairly robust and sophisticated. How hard was it to get your drivers to use the system? Did you in your implementation, was there a big learning curve for them, and how did you go about getting the system in place, and so sort of what is the overall response and the adoption? How hard was it to get adoption from your drivers?
Okay, that's a good question. Again, all drivers, as humans are, we're resistant to change. So what we did was we first realized what our technology intelligence level was with our drivers. We tried finding probably the lowest end of the spectrum as far as knowing technology, and we trained those drivers, those 2 or 3 drivers that were probably on the low end of technology, and every other driver, all 50 or 60 other drivers, knew the capacity of these people. And once they found out that they actually learned the system, they said, hey, listen, if those 2 or 3 drivers can learn it, I think we can do the same. So it's trying to get the long time, the senior drivers, and also the people that other drivers look up to try to get them to have the buy-in to the system. And we did that with trying to go over hardware with them and have them have a little bit of buy-in on how the system is set up. That's number one. Number two is we had a pretty large spreadsheet visible in the receiving office that had every driver's name on it and had 12 key learning objectives for each one of them. And every time the driver, successfully signed on to the handheld, we put a star in that box, all the way into grouping orders and processing cash and processing credits. And when the guy got to the end, we kind of gave him a little bit of an incentive to get to the end and gave him, a Subway gift card or something like that he completed that 12 steps of learning how the system worked. So hope that answered the question, but there's a lot more involved with each one of those steps along the way. But it's getting that driver buy-in. It did take a little bit of time, but once we got it started, just reinforcing the different steps and the proper procedures for your company and how you want to roll that out is probably the most important thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, John. So one other question that's come up from the audience here is the question here is: do payments get into a payment batch in your ERP system, or are they still keyed into your AR by your accounts receivable?
No, they are put into the system, and it's a keystroke to have it approved. There's still a one step to make sure that the cash is actually deposited or the check, but it's a keystroke and not a manual entry.
Well, thanks, John. And then I think that's another question here from the same audience member is that in terms of your ELD system, your hours of service system, how does it coexist, your POD and your ELD system? is your ELD a separate piece of hardware in the truck?
Yes. It is a separate piece of hardware. It's a 7-inch monitor that's actually in each one of our trucks. And even though Pell explained that handheld did have stop-to-stop directions, we didn't want it on a handheld device. We wanted it on something that was actually installed in the truck, just like your car might have, so he wasn't fumbling around with it in his hand. So we do have a 7-inch monitor in the truck that does DOT hours and hours of service, and also does stop-to-stop directions.
Yeah, just one more clarification to that, and this is a good question. So in the DiCarlo's case, that is essentially how they elected to actually implement ELD and POD. That said, there's also the opportunity for you, given the fact that the handheld hardware is an Android solution, you have also the option to essentially utilize the same handheld solution as also the display. It's really a matter of preference in terms of how you want it to implement the ELD and the POD, but you have the opportunity to share the hardware in terms of the display if that is essentially there's options to do that. Hopefully that answers your question, sir. Okay, it looks like we are at the top of the hour, and we've usurped a full hour here. I do appreciate everyone's participation into the webinar. John, thanks so much for sharing all this valuable information. Pell, thank you for delivering the demonstration. If there's any other questions, by all means, we'll push out essentially a follow-up email with contact information. We're happy to follow up with you to provide you any additional information for you to further learn and evaluate how you can certainly benefit from the Descartes mobile delivery management solution. But with that said, I think we'll adjourn here. Again, thanks everybody for your time, and hopefully we'll have a chance to chat as a follow-up. Thanks, John.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
All right, cheers.